Tonight we're talking about the state of Israel and Germany. Remember, we're keeping this in the years 49 to 52. And so I'll start by saying, we'll go to our first slide or whatever. In 1945, of course, the World War II is over. That's when the full horror of the Holocaust hits the Yishuv in Palestine as it did everywhere else as well. This is a little thing. This obviously is. These are the scenes that we're all familiar. There's Eisenhower, of course, and some of the Patton, who didn't like Jews, by the way, and others. And I could have given you worse scenes over here, but I don't need to. Everybody in the world sees these, and all the Jews in Israel see them in Palestine. All the Jews in America do, as well as the people who are not Jewish. And this lays the foundation for the fact that, as far as Jews are concerned, for perfectly understandable reasons, Hitler is Amalek, and the German people are the people of Amalek. And what do you do with Amalek? When you have nothing to do with them, you destroy their memory. It's just absolutely horrible. But there's no Germany in 1945. It doesn't exist.
To drink.
What's that? Oh, thank you. It's so kind of you. Thank you. Put it over here.
Okay, it is sugar.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. But there is no Germany, as I say, in 1945. Literally, when the war was over, Germany had to unconditional surrender. That means that the Allies dissolved the German government. They dissolved the German army. They ceased to exist. That was the conditions of the surrender, and the Germans had no choice but to agree. Down to the last minute, they tried to make some kind of a deal, but the Allies would say no. I'll tell you a story. When I was in Hopkins, I had a teacher one year, long ago, this is a long time ago, who was a black guy. He was a major in it wasn't a regular black guy, he was a major in the intelligence corps in the United States Army in World War II. And he was at Reims when they had to surrender the German army to Eisenhower and Beetlesmith. And I remember he told the class, he says, two things he remembers. First of all, the guy wanted to shake hands with Eisenhower. He said, I don't want to shake hands with you. And number two, they said, can we put in a few clauses or something? He said, no, unconditional surrender. Right? We're closing Germany down. So this happened, and the result was that Germany was divided under 4 occupation zones: the American army, the Russian army, the British army, as you see, and the French army. That's what it was. And 1945, 46, 47, 48, that was the reality. Germany as a country did not exist. It was completely occupied by the 4 powers. Now, there were plenty of Jews in Germany. This is all France. This is the American zone. Then this is the French zone. This is the French zone.
The little to the left.
That's the white thing.
Little red and white.
Oh, that's Luxembourg. That doesn't count. Now, it's not part of Germany. Okay? It's not part of Germany. Anyway, the point is, boy, we have some observant Jews here tonight. The point the irony is as follows. It ought to have been that as soon as the war was over, the bad guys got beaten, all the Jews pick up and leave and go somewhere else. We never want to have anything to do with Germany again. But that was not the case. Actually, there were plenty of Jews in Germany in 1945 and afterwards, and there were more coming in all the time, because nobody wanted to go back to Poland and Hungary and Romania and Russia, for crying out loud, and many did, and then turned around and went back, because they were killed by their neighbors. I was just reading a book called Savage Continent. It just came out by Professor Lowe, and about Europe in 1945, 1950. You get all these stories where a guy comes back to Poland or Russia somewhere, and the neighbors say, oh my God, 6 million people, I got Schlemazel, 6 million people get killed, and my neighbor has to be the one that survives? You understand? This was the welcome you got, and that was one of the better welcomes. So a lot of people, after they got beat up or something like that, they turned out because I'm going back to Germany, to the American Army zone. You see? So Germany actually fills up with Jews. But the idea, of course, was they weren't dealing with the Germans, they were dealing with these guys, right? Eisenhower and General Smith in the beginning, and then this guy, General Lucius Clay. These were the American commanders, and therefore the bosses, they made the decisions of what goes on in the American zone. And so the Germans were there, but they had to take orders from these guys. When Ben-Gurion, for example, late in 1945, visits the DP camps, and he wants to organize some kind of a Jewish thing and a Zionist thing over there, he doesn't deal with any Germans. He deals with Walter Beetlesmith, General Smith, and he says, I need this, that, and the other. And Smith says, I'll get you whatever you want. And they fly planes to Palestine and bring them back and forth. The Germans play no role in this whatsoever. But what's the future of Germany? What's the future of the German people? This is one of the supreme questions of the Cold War, right? Now, what is going to happen in the end? And so, should there be a permanent occupation of Germany in order to make sure the Nazis never come to power again? You can hear that. After all, you can't trust the German people. This was the Shita of these guys. Next, go to the next one. Here, of Morgenthau and his deputy, Harry Dexter White. Morgenthau was the Secretary of Treasury. He drew up and he didn't do anything, but this guy was his eminence grise, as they say, and he wrote up this whole plan for what they call the Morgenthau Plan, which is keep Germany divided into 4 parts or 14 parts, take away all their industry, destroy all the factories, put everybody on a farm, and let them live like that for the next 1,000 years. Maybe they'll get civilized by then. This was what he wanted. Now, to be perfectly honest, this plan coincided with what this guy wanted. Right? That was Stalin's plan. And this is not surprising because Harry Dexter White, the #2 guy at the Treasury Department, was a communist spy. His name was, a Jewish guy, I'm sorry to say. In the Roosevelt administration, there was an incredible number of communists in high positions. McCarthy wasn't totally crazy. And it is what it is. Anyway, so it's not surprising that they would draw up a plan, and he could sell it to Morgenthau, because Morgenthau, being Jewish, was anti-German anyway. And so this was one idea. What Stalin wants is a communist Germany, a red Germany, or else a Morgenthau chopped up Germany, or b'diavad, he'll take a united but demilitarized neutralist Germany of the Finland type. So in other words, Stalin said we had a big war that we just fought. We lost 30, 40 million people, as everybody knows. Germany is a tough nut. If they ever come back and get strong again, it could be a problem for Russia. If there is no Germany, if Germany's weak, Russia can always walk over and take over all of Europe, which is true. And therefore, it was in his plan. That's why Harry Dexter White pushed this idea. Stalin obviously wants any kind of set of circumstances which will facilitate an easily conquerable Europe. And so he wants a weak continent with bad economy, a lousy army, all the rest of it. The Red Army can just come in and take over one reason. For that exact reason, Truman and his secretaries of state, Burns and Marshall, want a strong Germany, a democratic Germany, precisely because Germany is the only country which can serve as the economic engine of general European economic recovery, and only a prosperous Europe will be impervious to the blandishments of communism. This is the basic feature of the Cold War. There's Truman, of course. Jimmy Burns was the Secretary of State in 45 and 46, and Marshall was the Secretary of State in 47, 48. Okay? And they obviously are going to reject the Morgenthau Plan. They say, we've got to build up Germany. Not for the Nazis, but we nevertheless have to build up Germany against Russia. Truman was determined, furthermore, not to repeat the mistakes of history, of the mistakes of the Treaty of Versailles in 1919. John Maynard Keynes, the famous economist, wrote a very famous book in 1920, The Mistakes of the Versailles Treaty, I think it was called, and where he predicted at that time that the Allies treated Germany so harshly, they gave them such a heavy indemnity to pay, and they crushed the German economy, and it took down Germany, but it also took down all of Europe economically, you see? So it was a huge mistake. Europe is a bunch of different countries that are always fighting each other, it's true. But it's really a small area. And it kind of fits together economically if they cooperate. But the heart of that cooperation, whether we like it or not, the Jews don't like it, whether they like it or not, is Germany in the middle. And you know, and I know even today, who's paying for all these poor countries. We read in the paper all the time. You don't have to be a great economist to know that Greece is complaining Germany doesn't give enough money, Spain, what they call the pigs, all these different poor countries in Europe, the Germans are still bailing them out. So they just have this tremendous economic capacity, and Truman said we have to build up Germany. So in 1945 to 1946 and 47, the Allied occupation wasn't working as far as Germany is concerned. It left the divided German provinces in an economic mess. The black market was flourishing, there was funny money, there were inefficiencies due to separate American, British, and French zones. They weren't doing it right, and the economy wasn't getting anywhere, and you had strikes, and you know, goods weren't being delivered, which is exactly why they started the Marshall Plan, right? Marshall was the Secretary of State at that time, and he says, we got to fix Germany, and the rest of Europe too, but it has to be done. The basic idea of Truman and Marshall, and then Acheson, as we know, took over after him, was to recreate Germany. Recreate Germany, but a pro-American Germany. Now, Truman was determined, not a Nazi Germany, they want to denazify it for sure, but after they denazify it, then let it be free and flourish. So it was Truman who insisted that they should try the war criminals, as we all know, and he sent America's best lawyer, just about, the very famous Supreme Court Justice Robert Jackson, one of the great jurists, to go over there and conduct a trial which basically had no, if you're a real lawyer, has no basis in international law, because there was no law called genocide or anything like that. And yet, Jackson, as a great jurist, said that, you know, there's like a natural law basis for this, and that humanity would cry if there wasn't. Take a look at the next piece. This is Jackson, I think.
The chief prosecutor for the United States of America.
At Nuremberg.
The privilege of opening the first trial in history for crimes against the peace of the world imposes a grave responsibility. The wrongs which we seek to condemn and punish have been so calculated, so malignant and so devastating that civilization cannot tolerate their being ignored, because it cannot survive their being repeated. That four great nations, flushed with victory and stung with injury, stay the hand of vengeance and voluntarily submit their captive enemies to the judgment of the law is one of the most significant tributes that power has ever paid to reason. This tribunal, while it is novel and experimental, is not the product of abstract speculation, nor is it created to vindicate legalistic theories. This inquest represents the practical effort of four of the most mighty of nations, with the support of 15 more, to utilize international law.
There is no count in the indictment that cannot be proved by books and records. The Germans were always meticulous record keepers, and these defendants had their share of the Teutonic passion for thoroughness in putting things on paper.
Okay, you get the idea, and it's a very interesting speech. He went on for hours. Because he had to make the case that this is really a matter of law. So the United States was not, like I say, interested in reviving Nazism or that kind of business. And furthermore, as you know, Truman was the first one to say to punish the criminals, and they did hang a bunch of them, 11 of them and so forth. Let's take a look at this. There's Robert Jackson again.
These men saw no evil, spoke none, and none was uttered in their presence.
Saying sarcastically.
When we put all of their stories together, this is the ridiculous composite picture of Hitler's government that emerges. It was composed of a number 2 man who knew nothing of the excesses of the Gestapo which he created. A number 3 man who was merely an innocent middleman transmitting Hitler's orders without even reading them, like a postman or a delivery boy. A foreign minister who knew little of foreign affairs and nothing of foreign policy. A security chief who was of the impression that the policing functions of his Gestapo and SD were somewhat on the order of directing traffic. A party philosopher who was interested in historical research and had no idea of the violence which his philosophy was inciting in the 20th century. Now, this may seem like a fantastic exaggeration, but this is what you would actually be obliged to conclude if you were to acquit these defendants.
This was the philosophy of the National Socialists. When for years they have deceived the world and masked falsehood with plausibilities, Can anyone be surprised that they will continue the habits of a lifetime in this dock? Credibility is one of the main issues of this trial.
Okay, and as we all know, they hanged them. So I will repeat, it wasn't a question of reviving a Nazi Germany. They didn't want to get rid of the Nazis, definitely punish the war criminals, but then move on and build a powerful pro-Western Germany in the combination of the American, the British, and the French zones. So if you take the next map, so if you combine this and this and this, no, I'm sorry, this is the Russian zone. If you combine this and this and this, you have a whole country. This is actually a little bigger than it is. You have a whole country by itself. And this became the basic Truman policy, especially after 1948, to create something called West Germany. It's one of the Truman administration's great accomplishments as they saw it over there. Now, how to do so? Where do you find the political leadership which is anti-communist, but is untainted by Nazi associations? That was hard. The answer is they found an old guy who's close to almost 75 years old, Konrad Adenauer, who'd been the mayor of Cologne, right? He born in 1876. See, he was a politician in the Kaiser's time. I mean, you know, long ago. And he was something in the Weimar Republic. As I say, he was the mayor of Cologne. That means that it's in Western Germany or in the Rhineland. He was a leading Catholic politician from the Catholic Party, which they used to call the Centrum, the Center Party, back in the Kaiser's Germany, you understand? And afterwards, which is very interesting because the Center Party was Catholic, but the Catholic Church puts on different masks in different countries. Usually, in most of the traditional Catholic countries in the late 1800s to early 1900s, the Catholic Church was very anti-Jewish, anti-liberal, anti-this. They want to maintain the clericalist stronghold on the control of the economy and religious coercion and all the rest of it. However, Germany, I'm talking about the state of Germany, has a different history because Germany as a nation was founded by Bismarck. Bismarck was a Prussian and a Protestant. Around the time that he was, just a year actually, 1869, that he was putting together the German Empire, the Pope at that time declared himself infallible. You understand? Pope Pius IX. I'm serious. This has become, as you know, a key doctrine of the Catholic Church. The Pope, whenever he speaks officially, not unofficially, when he speaks officially, he's infallible. For some reason, this drove Bismarck crazy. And he's like this. He says, if they're declaring infallibility, we're going back to the Middle Ages, and every Catholic who's loyal to the Catholic Church cannot be loyal to Germany because you can't have two masters. This is who you really are your boss. After all, he's infallible. And he said all the Catholics are Reichsfeinde, enemies of the Reich. And he launched a war, an internal war in Germany, a political war against the Catholic Church. They arrested priests, they closed down monasteries, they did all kinds of things. This is called in German history the Kulturkampf, the culture struggle, which raged in the early 1870s, and he wanted to suppress and crush this. Now, he wasn't successful, and after a while, he realized Catholics aren't my big problem, the left-wingers are my big problem. And so he kind of downplayed going after the Catholics, and he cut a deal with them. And they became, as I say, the Center Party, but because they had been burned by religious persecution, from then on the Catholic Party in Germany was also in favor of freedom of rights. So all of a sudden they became the champions of religious liberty and all the rest of it, which had the funny impact on the Jews. Because, let me put it this way, the Centrum, the Center Party, was the big party to which all the Orthodox Jews used to go to whenever they needed a favor with the government. Here's two famous Rabbanim in Germany, Rabbi Kahn from Fulda and Rabbi Cohen from Ansbach. Every time there was a question involving Shechita, or like you have today in Germany today, questions about banning circumcision, or better yet, if you lived in Germany, you had to go to public school. Public school is on Saturday also. That always means you have questions about writing and carrying books and all the rest of it, which means you have to get a letter, a special pass from the principal or for the teacher. It was a pain in the neck, but that's how life was in that time. Oh, you always go to the Catholic politicians. In other words, it's not what you think when you think of the Catholics as being super right-wing and, anti-Semitic, all the rest of it. They had that. But at the level of the political party, people like Konrad Adenauer and the others who held positions in the parliament or were mayors of big cities or things of this nature, or state government, actually got along very well with the local Jews. I'm sure we have one or two people here from Cologne, and if they go back far enough, they can tell you about this as well. I had a student once in Hopkins a number of years ago whose grandfather was from German Jews, from Cologne, and he was like best buddies with Adenauer back in the 1920s or something. They named a street after him and so forth. He was a well-known businessman. And anyway, so they got a guy from the past. He wasn't a Nazi, but he wasn't an anti-Nazi either. In Hitler's time, he simply left office, but he was very careful not to criticize the Nazi party. He was a capable politician who wants to re-emphasize Germany's Christian side, which is very interesting. The Holocaust could not happen. I mean, I know many people get this wrong. The Holocaust couldn't happen had Germany remained Christian. It was precisely because the Nazi regime dissed Christianity and adopted a paganism. You understand? That they on purpose abandoned all the fundamental Christian notions of right and wrong. There's a long history to what I'm saying, and it's too hard to explain. And there were Jews involved in the articulation, Jelinek and these other guys, Kelsen, who were famous law professors, who argued that law has nothing to do with morality and religion and things of this nature. And all that laid the groundwork for the totalitarian state that could carry out mass killings. And many Germans felt this. So after 1945, the fact that they want to reassert the religious side of the German character is actually not a bad thing. Jews usually get this wrong. They say the Holocaust happened because of Christianity and this, that, and the other. It's actually the opposite. As long as Germany was Christian, you couldn't have something like that. And so in this regard, philosophically and theologically, he was an opponent of the Nazis. He was a sneaky politician, as is fitting in slippery parliamentary politics. I mean, he was a politician's politician. He was an old man. He was Alter Cocker, 75 years old, and yet he went on to his 90s. If some people remember, he stayed in power for 15, 20 years, and he was in good health, too. He met John F. Kennedy. I remember when Kennedy was young, and he squeezed his hand, and Kennedy said, "Oh, you gave me the thing," because Kennedy was 40 years old with a bad back. And Adenauer was like 100 years old, and he was going great. See, so it's interesting. He founds a party called the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union. Right there's the famous first, electioneering slogan. And the Christian, that's the party that's in power in Germany at this minute, today, in 2013. The Christian Democratic Union means exactly what I just told you. It's Christian in the sense as opposed to paganism. It's also Christian in the sense that is obviously not for communists and socialists who are not believers. Okay? So right off the bat, you get a lot of people who don't feel comfortable in an atheist party standing up here. And it's also Christian in the sense that Jews won't like too much. And that is, it's Christian in the sense of forgiveness. You may have been in the Nazi past. We're going to forget about that. Don't do it anymore. But, what you did in the war is gone. And as far as we're concerned, everybody gets a new wash and a new start. And indeed, under Adenauer, a lot of ex-Nazis will have nice positions and big machers in the government, and they'll retire and die in bed. And, the Jews won't like that, but that's part of the deal that happens in Germany after this. America backs him totally because he backs America totally. He was a principled anti-communist. He was, after all, a Catholic politician. He hated Russia. He had anything to do with that. He hated socialism, and he wants to make a capitalist Germany. And so he's the best friend of Dean Acheson. Let's put it that way. If you take a look at this, they met a whole bunch of times. Acheson is the one who put him in power, to be honest. And he conducted the foreign policy. Here's one of the big meetings that they have over there, where they'll sign away, the Allies will sign the treaty giving West Germany a certain, independence. Not total independence, but independence. There's Acheson, I think, if I believe. There's Adenauer signing. And then you'll see, Anthony Eden from England, and all these other different guys in there. Right, there they are. There's Anthony Eden. There's a guy from France. And what does it do? It's the United States of America saying, this is our boy. And that the new Germany, not the Nazis, the new Germany is kosher. Okay? This is all happening from between 49 and 52, during Atchison's years. And together, Adenauer and Atchison will stoutly resist Stalin's tempting offers. Stalin freaked out over everything I'm just saying before. He didn't want Germany to rise. If you remember the map that we saw before, majority was under the Allied occupation, under the British and the Americans and the French. The Russians had their zone. Stalin kept saying like this: well, if you won't be pro-Western and pro-neutral, I'll release the Eastern zone, and then all Germany can be reunited, but in the conditions that they play ball with Russia, like Finland does. No, I won't make you be communists, all the rest. And Adenauer said, no, we'd rather have half a loaf than the whole thing. We'd have nothing to do with Russia. You know, you can go take a long jump and so forth. And all during 1949, 1950, 51, 52, the Russians kept offering this kind of proposition, that kind of proposition, and this was Atchison and Adenauer said no, 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 and no. You know, and we're going to do our own thing, and we'd rather not have all of Germany in there. The opposition party was the SDP, the Social Democratic Party, which we'll talk about a little bit later, and they said, no, this is crazy. It's better to unite Germany, get the Russian army out of there, and have a normal country again, and we don't want to be part of the Cold War. And Adenauer says, we do want to be part of the Cold War. He said, wake up and smell the coffee. Whether the Russian army be next door, if we don't arm ourselves and stick with the Americans, it'll be toast. Adenauer was the one who started the policy where he says, American army, stay in Germany, don't leave. Now I want to tell you something. It's 2013, the Cold War's over. It's still an American army in Germany as we speak. Am I right? So the United States maintains it. Why do they maintain an army? It's not like Iraq where the people want them out. The Germans want them in. You understand? The Germans want him in. This started with Adenauer. In 1949, when he took over and became the prime minister, the chancellor, Germany was a mess. But he was determined, even though he was an old guy, to fix everything, and he does. That's the amazing story, thanks to the fact that he had an economic genius, Ludwig Erhard, who he put in charge of the economy. Erhard was a capitalist, extremely capable economics guy. In the middle of World War II, he was already drawing up plans for the future. I mean, he's quite a guy. And and what he ends up doing is creating a uniquely German. It can work in Germany. It can't work somewhere else. It's what they call the social market policy, which means they're going to get out of the way of the industry and the capitalists and develop the industry. The industry will play ball, not like in America, take the money and put it in third world countries. They'll keep it over here. The unions will play ball. The government will put in place a social welfare system. So you'll get your Medicare and Medicaid and Social Security and unemployment insurance and all that kind of stuff. So by giving the public the basic goodies that a socialist system gives, but at the same time doing it in such a way that the capitalism can work without government controls. They cut the corporate taxes down to nothing, for example, and things like that. He combined the Democratic and Republican Party, as we would say today, in such an interesting and successful way, and you could only do it because the Germans are a certain type, he understood mentality, could get the unions and the bosses to agree, and the result was the economy shot through the roof. He actually, Adenauer will imitate Bismarck in this regard. Right? Bismarck is famous when he became the Chancellor of Germany. He says, we have to steal the clothes of the socialists. You understand? He says, why are the people voting for socialism? Not because they like Karl Marx, all the rest of it. Because they want Social Security and unemployment insurance, that sort of thing. We'll give it to them. And then there'll be no reason to vote for the non-conservative parties, and that's what happened in Bismarck's Germany, and that's what happens in Adenauer's Germany, and it'll be very popular and very successful, all this stuff, and as a result, Adenauer will win re-election over and over and over again. I love the next slogan. You know, America, before we show it, America, Obama ran on the slogan, change. Yeah. No. What I like about this is you can tell things about a national culture by the slogans that are popular and get traction. And so in America, indeed, it is true. We're always talking about a new frontier and a new tomorrow and a new this and a new that. Adenauer was challenged in this third election, and the socialists said, what are you going to do? You know, we're a party with, socialists said, we're a party with new ideas. We have dramatic plans to change the life of everybody. What is your policy? And he's famous as, I guess, no change. Right? Look at this. Konrad Adenauer, kind of experiment, no experiments. You see? What are you going to do in the next 4 years? The exact same thing we did in the other 4 years. If you don't like it, lump it. and he won a tremendous victory. So it goes to show you that every country has its own, ideas, but the Germans yearned for stability. He had a system that was working, and he didn't want to, don't play with it. And if you're a worker in Germany and you're finally getting a job and you're rebuilding the cities that were bombed by the Allies and you're starting to put the factories together and starting to work, don't tamper with it, don't mess with it. That was the idea. As I said, the problem was that the CDU, the Christian Democratic Union, the party, was too forgiving of the ex-Nazis. And this was a problem, but this was a fundamental part of his popularity. Truman, an adjutant appointed John J. McCloy to be the United States High Commissioner in Germany under the new Adenauer administration. John J. McCloy was a very conservative Republican, Macher and all the rest of it, and he was the type of person to cooperate with the big, rich German industrialists, and he would not push them to get rid of the ex-Nazis. You understand? He said, we got the Russians to worry about, keep the Germans happy, and so forth, and that's what happened. So all this is happening in 1949 to 1952, the exact years that the State of Israel is starting to walk, to get up and try to walk. Right? Everything I just said is coinciding historically with the beginning of Medinat Yisrael, as we all know. To Israel, naturally, Germany equals Amalek. Okay? Indeed, they all said Germany should be ostracized, and it should be a pariah, like a leprosy. These two people, Dr. Baru and Max Neuhoff, who were famous Jewish in the Knesset, this was the head of the German Jews, and he was in the Mizrahi. They're famous. There was a big international meeting in Turkey, and they both got up and made a speech. The Germans should be kicked out of this meeting. They should have nothing to do with them. Nobody should even have anything to do with them. And they carried on and on. And it was very embarrassing to Germany, you see. And so this was the consensus in Eretz Yisrael, and I totally understand it. Furthermore, already in 1945, groups of German Jews had begun to organize to ask the future German government for compensation for the economic losses ever since 1933. Now I'm talking about German Jews. We have some German Jews here in the audience. There could be someone who they lost their business, they're kicked, they had to leave the country, as you understand all this, and therefore there's a specific loss that I had a store in Berlin or in Frankfurt or something like that, and at a farm, I had this, that, and the other. And to German non-Jews, the notion that the Hitler regime had disenfranchised German Jews and had taken their property, this was something that even the German government had a consensus on was wrong. It just really got them in the wrong way, because what Hitler had done had really been something which is illegal, right? I know they made it legal, but it was not, it went against the crawl. And Adenauer and these other guys said, I guess, for Jews who are from Germany that actually had to take losses, I mean, that we should settle, in a manner that you, pay them off or something like that, because what was done to them was not right. And early on, Germany indicates a willingness to do something for the Yankees. But what about the non-German Jews? You ever hear of the Jews in Poland and the rest of Europe, all the rest of it? Who speaks for them? You see? And the answer, of course, is everybody does. Every organization pops up like mushrooms in 1945, 46, 47, 48, and say, we speak for the Jews of Lithuania. We speak for the Jews of Hungary. No, you don't. I speak for the Jews of Hungary. In the old line of who made you boss and all the rest of it. Everybody means nobody. And so the Germans will be able to say like this, I have 10 different people claiming to be, you got to get your act together. So the Zionist leader Nachum Goldman starts to organize the groups. Right? And he was one of the big Machin Zionist leaders. Now, he was a real bull artist. He created something called the World Jewish Congress, which still exists in terms of having a web presence and all this. But what's the World Jewish Congress? I mean, I love these names. Who invented these guys? Where did they get the right to represent the Jewish people? The American Jewish Congress, the American Jewish this, these are all self-elected, self-appointed things. But, it gives them an excuse to be able to talk to all the world leaders and things of this nature. And his idea is, you shut up. If I get something for you, what are you complaining about? And that's exactly who Nachum Goldman was. Now, here he did a good thing. He, as I say before, is the head of World Jewish Congress. He's used to construction of paper organizations. But, his argument was like this. Either you all cooperate with me or nobody gets a penny. So how about it, guys? Indefatigably negotiating with all the Jewish groups during 1950-51, he establishes something called the Claims Conference. right? The conference of all the different organizations, they couldn't call him a union because he had the Aguda there, and he also had the Jewish Communist Party, and he had the Jewish labor groups, and he had the Zionist group, he had the anti-Zionist group, this group, that, and the Lithuanian refugees, and the this and that and the other. And like he said, if you all just claim your own thing, nobody will get anything. So let's call it the Claims Conference and get some money out of this. It was very important to do that because he did sell this to the Germans. He says, I represent the Jews. You see? And in classic Theodor Herzl fashion, if Germany gets some money, then I guess it worked. You see? He doesn't represent anybody, but if it works, it works. He established contact with the German government. Now, Nachum Goldman was born in Lithuania, but grew up in Germany, went to a German university, all the rest of it. He actually even worked in the German foreign ministry for a while in the First World War. And he was very good with Germans. He established contact in 1950 with the German government, which is very wary, understandably, reluctant to deal with an open-ended financial commitment to who knows how many Jews. Right? You have to look at it from their point of view. They want to pay victims of the Holocaust, but who's the victim of the Holocaust? Everybody steps up. And, the Germans like things organized and orderly and all the rest of it, and you're not going to get that. So that's where things are holding over there. Meanwhile, in Israel, as we have discussed in this series, the economy is going from bad to worse. This is the face of the Israeli economy. Dov Yosef, with the tzena and the rationing, all the rest. Like I say, I'm hoping to do the 13th. If we're able to put together the 13th lecture, I want to devote to this because it's Rube Goldberg, But anyway, so the economy is going down the tubes. Ben Gurion faces a tricky situation. On the one hand, there's a very strong feeling in the state of Israel that the Germans are tameh. And that Israel should have nothing to do with Germany, the land of blood. Israel should be the model for quarantining the pariah state. What the Germans did to the Jews was so uniquely evil that it calls for a severe moral response in the form of a quarantine. And I get it, you get it, you can hear that. On the other hand, Israel is like crazy hard up for cash. The Olim are pouring in all the time. The Tzena is not really working. The country's on the brink of economic collapse. Now, if you can get some bucks out of Germany, you hear what I'm saying? After all, how terrible it would be. After 2,000 years, the Jews finally get a state, successfully fight the Arabs for it, and then it falls because of no money. That's what people are saying, and totally correctly, in 1950, 51, 52. And anyway, it's our money. The conservative estimates of the economists is that the Nazis took $6 billion from the Jews. You understand what I'm saying? Notice, besides killing 6 million people, they took property of all types. And $6 billion, and that's money in those days. What's $6 billion in 1940 dollars? It's a whole lot more, 50 billion or something like that. So it's our money, so there's nothing wrong with getting it back. In early 1951, therefore, Israel tries to have its cake, and eat it, as they say, sends a letter to the 4 occupying powers. They send an official letter to Russia, to America, to Britain, to France. And they say, you make Germany, the new country of Adnar, you make them give us $1.5 billion. How do you come up with $1.5 billion? We're resettling 500,000 Holocaust victims. It's 3,000 a person. This is what we catch. It comes out $1.5 billion. And that time, $1.5 billion was serious money. And that's why the money should go to Israel. We're the ones who are actually doing something specifically to repair the Holocaust, you might say. Russia, Stalin, doesn't even bother to respond. But the other 3 powers do. And they say, talk to Germany. What are you coming to us for? There's a country called Germany. Don't bother us. Ben Gurion is reluctant to do so. Because in Israel at that time, 1951, there's still super hot feeling against Germany, and we totally understand. Here's Yosef Sprinzak, the Speaker of the House, Speaker of the Knesset, who says, and he's in the Mapai, the honor of the Jewish people precludes any acceptance of restitution from Germany, even if it were voluntarily and spontaneously offered. And I understand where he's coming from, and I respect that position. Right? I hope you respect that position. But but it's not real. You see? It's not real. And so Ben Gurion and Sharet, who get the bills every day, they conclude that they must overcome reluctance and engage directly with Germany. Moshe Sharett, who was Israel's foreign minister and the number 2 in the government, a very eloquent, very interesting on all this, and his position was like this: a nation does not indulge in emotion. You cannot run a country in emotion. We respect the emotion, but that's not the basis for state action. Once he made one speech after another about this. Once we became an independent country, that imposes certain obligations upon us. Now, George Washington said this about America. He says you can have no entangling alliances, and you can't have any friendships and enmities. You just got to follow cool, straight, up the middle. What's the policy that's best for the United States? So Sharett was saying that over here. He said, look, Germany is a fact, and it's going to become more important as time goes by. Israel cannot afford alienated relations with Germany. It's just a fact. They're going to get stronger and stronger in Europe. That's who they are. Not that I like it. He said this was going to be. Germany's influence is going to be more and more powerful as time goes on. It'll either be for us or against us. So you decide. But if you say it's a pariah, it's a this, it's a that, then be prepared to live with the consequences. You understand? Ben-Gurion said, I don't care about philosophy. We need the money. And all during 1950, Israel seeks to get the money without direct negotiations. But by 1951, they say they decide on direct talks. In April of 51 is a secret meeting between Adenauer on one hand and the 2 top Israeli finance officials. This is David Horowitz, the head of the number 2 at the finance ministry. He was their expert in economics, such as it was. And Maurice Fisher was the Israeli ambassador to France. He was a guy from Antwerp, and so he knew all the languages. He was a famous Israeli diplomat, and they meet secretly with Konrad Adenauer. Adenauer's attitude is, look, I mean, he'd rather dissociate Germany, the new Germany anyway, West Germany, from responsibility for the Shoah. But he's not stupid, and so he mans up. And he said, we will pay, at least in principle. Now, for practical, go negotiate with my bureaucrats. But first, I'm going to have to prepare public opinion, as we would say, in Germany and secure a vote of approval from the Bundestag, from the German parliament, to conduct negotiations with Israel. You're talking about a lot of money. I don't know how much money is going to be in the end. This is something, I'm telling you as a politician, needs to be done openly, and we have to get reshus from the German people, from the German parliament, to conduct these negotiations. John J. McCloy, the American High Commissioner over there, as I say, was a very strong conservative Republican, did say, he said, here the Jews are right. It's famous. He said, the manner in which the Germans will deal with the Jewish issue will be considered the test of character for this young and emerging democracy. Now, one of the reasons he said that is because John J. McCloy's number 2 was a guy named Benjamin Buttenweiser, who was the president of the Temple Emmanuel in Manhattan, you know, one of these Wall Street, Kuhn Loeb, one of these high-class German, Jewish, American lawyer Wall Street types. And, you know, he's constantly talking to McCloy over there to do so. In September of 1951, Adenauer addresses the Bundestag, and makes a very famous speech. As you can see over here, the government of Federal Republic of Germany, and with it, now in this speech he's going to fudge it, because that's what Germans do and that's what politicians do. But it's the goal that counts. What does he say? The government of Federal Republic of Germany, the great majority of German people are aware of the immeasurable suffering inflicted upon the Jews in Germany and the occupied territories in the era of Nazism, National Socialism. Now, of course, the large majority of German people abhorred the crimes and didn't participate in them. I mean, what's he going to say? You know? There were many Germans, despite endangering themselves out of religious reason to call the conscience a shame and dishonor German name, who shared a willingness to help their fellow Jewish citizens in the name of the Jewish, in the name of the German people. I mean, you could count them on your hand. But you know, this is politics. Okay, unspeakable crimes regarding the extent of the reparations want us to take into account the limits set on the German ability by the bitter necessity to supply to countless victims of war and care for refugees and expellees. Let me explain what this means. When Germany lost the war in 1945, what happened then was that the rest of Europe threw 8 million Germans into Germany. I'll tell you what I mean. You know, Hitler took advantage of the fifth column. I'll give you an example. I know many of you know this. You had a country called Czechoslovakia. But part of Czechoslovakia was called the Sudetenland. And the Sudeten was a bunch of Germans. So Hitler used that to go and beat up Czechoslovakia. So when the war was over, the Czechs said, to hell with this. We're throwing every single German out into Germany. We're kicking them out. No more Germans in Czechoslovakia. Poland did the same thing. Poland took over the eastern provinces of Germany. No, they're not the eastern provinces of Germany anymore. We have 4 million Germans. Get the heck out of here and go into Germany. Drop dead for all I care. You're out of here. Same thing with Hungary. Same thing with Romania. Same thing with Bulgaria. Same thing with Yugoslavia. Then you had millions and millions of people coming in to Germany, and the Germans, I'll give them credit for this. They said, okay, we'll handle this. You understand? At least Adenauer said that. He says, we'll handle this. The truth of the matter is, if you have a good capitalist economy, if you have an economic boom, the more people, the better, because you have more workers. But nobody knew it at that time. So he's saying, of course, yes, we have to take care of the Jews. Of course, bitter necessity, we have to take care of Germans too. And he's playing to the, what shall I say, the prejudices of his audience, but why not? He's a politician. You understand? The federal government is prepared to bring out a solution to the material reparation problem, which is the most distinguished duty of the German people. So you have to give him credit by saying like this, we do owe the Jews something. Question is how much and where and when. So the Bundestag votes to approve negotiating with Israel, at least in principle. But the German bureaucrats freak out. This is going to bankrupt us. The German finance minister, Schaffer, who is a real Nazi, he said the Jews want their Geld, you understand? Et cetera, and it plays out there. And this in September of 51. In October of 51, Nachum Goldman gets the claims conference together to say that they're going to coordinate with the state of Israel, because they have a totally separate thing. They're saying like this, we want money for the state of Israel, we also want money for the individual Jews who suffered. So Germany is going to be hit with two big bills, and you can understand from the German point of view, like what's going on over here, and how many Jews we're talking about, and so forth and so on. In January of 52, with the economy really in the air, Ben-Gurion takes the big step, and he says, I'm asking the Knesset also for approval to negotiate directly with Germany. We have to sit down with the Sultan. All hell breaks loose as opponents furiously excoriate Ben-Gurion and his policy. This led to riots, almost to bloodshed, and went crazy in Yerushalayim. Menachem Begin, at this particular moment in January 52, is just recovering from the disastrous elections of the previous October, the 51 Knesset elections. The Cherut party under him went from 14 to 8, almost in half. He looked like a major loser. He's down. If you know who Begin was, and I like Begin, he was a manic depressive, and so he was up and he was down. This time he was very much down. And he starts giving all these speeches in the Knesset. How low can you get? And he says to Ben-Gurion in a famous speech, how much you getting for Bubby? Getting a good deal? You know, a Jew gets a good deal for his relative, doesn't he? You're a real Jew. Everything is money, money. You stand before a pile of skulls. The martyrs are a people, and you handle. This is a terrible Chilul Hashem, and I respect those feelings. Right? You can understand where they're coming from. But Moshe Sheret gives also a famous speech where he says, Al laregesh ligbor al sechel. That emotion, when you're running a country, cannot trump reason. Okay? And Germany, as he said, is part of the world. The other countries are not going to boycott Germany. Wake up and smell the coffee. If you boycott Germany, the one who's going to be isolated is Israel. Right? Sheret said to Begin, there was a whole confrontation. He says, you refuse to accept the cold logic of sovereignty. But I don't. And Ben-Gurion, anyway, said, it's our money. Should we say to Germany, Haratzachta v'gam yarashta? In the Tanakh, there's the famous story of Achov, the king of Israel. I'm sure some of you know the story, where he wants the vineyard of Novos next door to his palace. And Novos won't sell. And by the time it's all over, Jezebel, his wife, gets Novos killed on a miscarriage of justice. And Achav's a little bit hesitant about it, but then she says, oh, he died, and he was a traitor to the crown, so you get his vineyard automatically. And he walks into the vineyard, and standing there is Eliyahu Navi, his worst nemesis. And Eliyahu Navi said, I guess, you're a real jerk. Haratzachta v'gam yarashta, you murdered the guy, and after you murdered him, now you claim to be the heir. So Ben-Gurion said, I guess, they took $6 billion from us, and now they want to hold on to it. This is wrong also. Okay? And Ben-Gurion said like this is a new Germany. This became a feature. He said, now it's a new parsha. You can't hold the Germans responsible today for what happened yesterday, and we have to deal with them this way. Now, this really was a red flag, because everybody said, this is not a new Germany. This is the same old Germany as before. And this slogan will make Ben Gurion very popular over the next 10 years in Germany, but it's loathed in Israel, as you can imagine. And in the middle of all this debate, Menachem Begin assembles a huge crowd in Kikar Shabbat. You all know what that is, right in the middle of Geula. At that time, the Knesset wasn't where it is today. The Knesset was on King George Street in Fruman. Many of you know what I'm talking about. When you walk up from Kikar Shabbat, up, Strauss or something, you go a few blocks, then you're already at Sabaros, and then another block and a half. You're at where the old Knesset building. I think now it's a Rabbanut building or something like that. So you can just imagine, he gets this whole group heated up, and he says, we're going to take down the government. This is the greatest Chil Hashem in Jewish history. I repeat, the greatest Chil Hashem ever in Jewish history. What's doing over here is beyond the pale. We're not going to accept this and the other. And everybody's going, He says, now let's go take the Knesset. It's only 2-3 blocks away. And so a huge crowd goes from Geula Street, as they call it, right up the thing to King George, and to storm the Knesset. Begin says, we will now launch a bloody revolution. When they destroyed the Altalena, I gave the orders not to shoot. Today I say shoot. And so he lost it. You understand? I mean, he was over the top. The Knesset is broken into. Rocks are thrown at the Knesset member. It's a mob rule. Let's take a look at this for a second. There's Begin.
שבגין מקנה בבן גוריון שנפלה בחלקו הכרזת העצמאות, ובן גוריון מקנה בבגין על שהעז
immediately before that.
בכוח. דמותו של מנחם בגין בשנים הראשונות למדינה מצטיירת כדמות נואם קיצוני בדעותיו, חסר יכולת להגיע לפשרה.
He speaks like a wild man.
מנהיג חסידים עברים. בין הכנסת הראשונה לכנסת השנייה מכריז בן גוריון בלי חירות ובלי מקי, וקובע הלכה למפאי לשנים רבות.
Torchlight parades.
באין לו תפקיד ביצועי, מתמסר בגין להנצחת זכרה של אצ"ל ושל הנופלים בשמה. ברמת גן, מול המשטרה הבריטית לשעבר, חונך בגין את פסל הזיכרון לדוב גרונר, שעלה לגרדום בעכו. בראשית ינואר 52, נפתח בכנסת הדיון על שחרור גרמניה. כ-50,000 איש שומעים את בגין מאיים להכריז מלחמה לחיים ולמוות במחייב השילומים. טראומת השואה מלווה את בגין כל ימיו, והיא מכתיבה את יחסו לגרמניה כשהיה ראש ממשלה בישראל.
אתם הגרמנים ידעתם וגם לקחתם שלום. עכשיו אתם קוראים Wiedergutmachung למה שנקרא שילומים. כשאני שומע את המילה הגרמנית הזאת, אתם יודעים מה פירושה בעברית? תיקון העוול. הגרמנים תיקנו את העוול שעשו לנו, משום שנתנו לנו $800 מיליון. הם לא רק הרגו 6 מיליון אנשים, נשים וילדים, הם גם שדדו את דמנו בעשרות אם לא ב$100 מיליארד. כסף, זהב, רכוש, בתים, ערים שלמות. ובשביל זה, במקום זה, נתנו לנו $800 מיליון. וזה נקרא Wiedergutmachung, תיקון העוול ההיסטורי שאתם עשיתם לעם היהודי. והכסף שלכם הוא דרוש לנו. יש פה ברוך השם יהודים גאים שיכולו לקבל את הפיצויים. הם סירבו, איננו רוצים כסף גרמני.
So I think you get the idea. It's pretty strong opinion on this sort of subject. For those who don't understand what he's saying, for the heart of it is when the money is finally negotiated, they get the money. The German term is Wiedergutmachung, which means make it good. So I hurt you, and I'm going to make it good. So he's saying like this: they killed 6 million people. This makes it good. Listen, and for $800 million, whatever they're going to get. Now everything's okay? What kind of, disgusting people are we? And so forth. So I get it, but he went too far. And the reason I say he went too far is they broke into the cassette, they threw stones at people. Ben-Gurion summons the army, and he also brings a bunch of kibbutzniks with the sticks and things like that. And he gives a famous speech the next day where he says, "A hand has been raised against Israeli democracy. Let me assure the citizens of this country that the hand is going to be chopped off." Because, first of all, you have to have respect for law and order. You can't just go do this. I understand the emotions that were triggered by all this, and that's the reason I'm telling you about this tonight. And when I say I understand, because we understand what the Holocaust was, and these are all people who survived the Holocaust and things like that. But you don't say, now we're going to make a revolution, and now we're going to destroy everything in order to accomplish this. So it was a face-off. Begin was sanctioned by the Knesset. He was kicked out for 8 months. You understand? And for unparliamentary behavior. And, the thing didn't happen. Ben-Gurion said, we're going to make sure this goes ahead and happens. The Mapam party, which is on the left, also hates Ben-Gurion. And so they say, this is now we have in Israel a Judenrat. You know what that is? The Jewish Council and the Warsaw Ghetto and these other places cooperating with the Germans. Rhetoric was on overkill over there, but that shows you how emotional this issue was. I'll tell you something really cute. If you look, it just comes to my mind at this minute. If you look in next week's parsha or 2 weeks' parsha, it says, "Daber no ba'oznei ha'am v'yishlu mitzrayim klei chesed v'klei yisav u'smalot." That Hashem, God says to the Jewish people, please beg the Jews to take gold and silver from the Egyptians. So it's a famous question. To the Jews, you have to say, please take the money? Why please? So Rashi gives one interpretation, but the Oznaim LaTorah, Rabbi Sorotskin, who lives in Israel at this time, he says, I'll tell you what's happening. He says, the Jews in Egypt, he suggests, didn't want the stinking Egyptian money. They don't want it like Begin. How much are you getting for this one? And how much for the kid that was crushed in the pyramids and all the rest of it? Notice he transposed this whole emotional scene to the story in the Chumash, which goes to show you where Israeli culture was holding at that particular moment. Ben-Gurion pushed through the vote in spite of all this, 61-50. There's a strong feeling both sides in favor of the negotiations, and an Israeli team then goes to Europe, to The Hague, and they negotiate with the German Treasury officials from March to September of 1952. The German finance minister was a real mumser, Fritz Schaffer, this guy. He wanted the Jew down, as he put it, the amount, and instead, let's put it this way, Israel is asking for 1,500 million. Schaffer says, how about 100 million, maybe 2? He's saying this is where he's going over here. He won't give. He's a real German of the worst type. The Jews are frustrated, deadlocked. What are you going to do? So I'll tell you what they do. They call Eddie Jacobson. He speaks to Truman. Truman speaks to Atchison. Atchison speaks to Adenauer. That's what happened. And Truman is famous. He called Atchison up a book. He said, give the Jews their damn money. Tell the Germans to give them the money. And Atchison, who wasn't crazy about all this, says to Adenauer, and remember, they were best friends. And he said, this is something that I think you really want to do. You understand? Because the public opinion in America, Germany is having enough trouble getting off disassociating itself with the past. We want to show there's really a new Germany and so forth. And anyway, he says, "Listen, what can I do?" The president spoke to Eddie Jacobson. I'm just a messenger boy over here, and I'll tell you the truth. Adenauer was very grateful to Atchison and to Truman. It's really amazing. I saw once a interview that Adenauer did in the 1960s when he was in his 90 or so. And somebody says, do you know about America? He said, oh, yeah, I studied American history and this, that, and the other. Who's the first American president, the greatest American president? George Washington. Who's the second greatest American president? Harry S. Truman. He said, well, for him it was. You see? So if Truman, said, give him the damn money, that's what he did. So basically, Adenauer calls in his officials. He had a big fight with Schaffer, and he said, listen, we're going to do this. And the Treasury guy said, we can't do this, all the rest. And I said, we're going to do this. You see? Another very important player behind the scenes, all this, was from Baltimore, Blaustein. Okay? Jacob Blaustein. You see it with Truman, Jacob Blaustein, who's not a German Jew. His father came from Russia. You know, he started a poor Baltimore family. They built themselves up. Blaustein was in the oil business. And he was listen to this, he was the only oil guy to back Truman in 48. Gave him $100,000. You know, 48, everybody thought Truman was going to lose. You know, the story, the Dewey election. So when Truman won, Blaustein had a lot of clout at the White House. And he became that year in 1948 the head of the American Jewish Committee. But we'll be talking about him next week, actually. Very important person at this time, behind the scenes, because that's who he is. You know, he's not in favor of the publicity, and he gets it. And he's speaking with Truman and all the rest of it. He said, "This is something Germany really needs to do." So, because of all this, it happened. Adenauer, as they say, rams through. You know, when he needed to, he could be a very strong leader, and he rammed this through his team. He fought his own officials. They said, "We're going to do this," and they signed the Treaty of Luxembourg. Right? There you go. There's Adenauer. And also the Treaty of Luxembourg in September of 1952. The final price is $820 million to Israel, $500 million for the claims conference. That's about half of what Israel wanted. Which is, you know, I'm not a negotiator, but I'm sure many negotiators will tell you that, you know, that's more or less what you're going to figure on. The Germans started, as I say, with $100 million, and they had to go to $800 million. It's not what they should have gotten, but on the other hand, it's a lot of money in 1952. Okay? It's a lot of money. And another $500 million for the individual claims conference, you know, for the individual Jews. When the vote comes after the treaty is signed in the Bundestag to pass this, the Germans think this is horrible. The Jews are ripping us off. And there's much opposition from the CDU, from Adenauer's own party, the Christian Democratic Union. Adenauer rams it through, but he can't. He's not able to carry his own party. The majority of his own party votes against the treaty. But the opposition party votes for it unanimously. That's good, right? The Social Democratic Party gives them the majority. You understand? All the people in the opposition party totally did it. So their whole party, together with half of his own party, they were able to put this through. Why does the Social Democratic Party want to do this? Because of the noble legacy of this guy, right? Who nobody's ever heard of. He was Adenauer's opposite. He was the head of the, Kurt Schumacher was the head of the German Social Democratic Party, and he just died the month before, in August of '52. Kurt Schumacher was a German, not Jewish, and he was not anti-Semitic at all. He actually grew up, it's very interesting, he grew up in the far eastern border of the Kaiser's Empire in Chelmno, where later on they had, unfortunately, the extermination camp. And he grew up in a small town where there were a few Jews, a few Germans, and a few Poles. And so he had very good Jewish friends. And all of his life, he was a socialist of the good type, so to speak. And when Hitler came to power, he lost an arm fighting in the Kaiser's army in the First World War. And when Hitler came to power, he was ferociously opposed to Hitler. And Hitler beat the heck out of him. For 12 years, he was tortured in German concentration camps, you know, for political prisoners. He suffered a lot. In fact, he lost a leg and all this other stuff. And so, he wouldn't change. And so when the war was over, he had tremendous moral authority. And if it was totally up to the Germans, I mean, he probably would have been the prime minister, but the British and the Americans pushed it on now, and they gave him a lot of help. You see? Now, Kurt Schumacher, as I said before, was completely not Jewish, but he was a very principled person, and he already said in 1948, he says, you know, what the German, and he didn't do anything wrong. He was an opponent of Hitler who suffered under Hitler, but he said what the German people have done to the Jews is unforgivable. We voluntarily should give them the money. This is just a moral obligation on the part of Germany. And shouldn't even bargain, you know, give them a big sum and all the rest of it. Now, that's not what happened, but long before Adenauer got on board, after being pressured by Truman and all these other people, this guy was saying to do it. He had just died in August of '52, and under his moral legacy, the Social Democratic Party said this is something that should be done, and as I say, their votes put it over, which means, therefore, that Israel was going to get about $100 million a year for 8 or 9 years in goods. Now, the Germans did this in such a way, it's smart for the German economy. Israel didn't lose by it, though. What happened was that what they said was, this is the Shulamim agreement. They said, you'll get like approximately $100 million a year. You'll have a purchasing mission in Cologne, and they will take orders at a fair price and buy German stuff, meaning to create Israeli infrastructure projects, roads, bridges, railroads, factories, and all kind of things like that, which means, of course, that the Mapai controlled all the money coming in, but they use it for national infrastructure projects, and this is what created the basic Israeli infrastructure. This is what turned Israel into a modern country in the 1950s. They didn't have the money to do it on their own. So it wasn't cash that was coming in, but it was as good as cash if you know how to use it correctly over there. The Zionist significance of this is enormous, because I want you to understand what I'm talking about tonight. Germany is one thing to pay individual people for what happened to them, and they did that also. But what we're talking about is, in a collective sense, in a national sense, how do you pay reparations to Klal Yisrael? Because that's really what we were talking about over here. We're saying Germany, as Germany, has to pay something to Klal Yisrael. Where is Klal Yisrael? The state of Israel. They put it by giving them money. So what they were acknowledging was that Israel is the embodiment of the Jewish people, and that's why they get it. To be perfectly honest, if it was up to Ben-Gurion, these guys, they wouldn't give no money to any individual Jew. Israel would take every penny of it. But Nachum Goldman stopped that. Adenauer offers full diplomatic relations in 1952. He said, let's just clear the air and have complete normal diplomatic relations between Israel and Germany. Ben-Gurion was afraid of that. He says, I almost had a riot, revolution, just take the money. If we get a German ambassador over here, it'll go crazy and all that. And so they won't do that over the next 10 years. Instead, Ben-Gurion appoints unofficially Dr. Felix Shinar. I guess he's this guy, I think. He says, who sets up an office in Cologne. This was a perfect shidduch, because Shinar was a German Jew. He went to university, gymnasium university, I think in Württemberg or someplace like over there. He went to the same colleges and all that the German opposite numbers went to. You understand? He's a Jewish guy, of course, but he fully understands the Germans. They understand him. And he had all the German virtues. And by that I mean very honest, down to the penny, very transparent. The German officials liked dealing with him. You understand? There was no shtick and no kunzen. There's $100 million this year to play with, and how much is it going and based on what? And there should be complete honesty and transparency in all the economic handlings, and they did. Okay? He had the great confidence of Adenauer and eventually of the German Bundestag. Dr. Shinar did. As the 1950s unfolds, it will become clear that the German parliament had been worried we're paying too much to the Jews. This is going to hurt the German economy. But as the 1950s passes by, it becomes clear that the Shilumim, which is what they call this thing, is no burden on the economy at all. It's the opposite. Under Erhard, they're giving more and more money away, and the economy is growing bigger and bigger all the time. Now, Germany can handle this. Now, you have to understand, Truman and the others said that, if you don't want Hitler to come back, you have to have a prosperous Germany. Hitler came in the first place because of the Depression and all that. We need the opposite. But the good news is that the Germans gave more and more money, and it didn't hurt them at all. You see, they themselves were surprised at this. Adenauer, as time goes by, comes to like the image of a moral, repentant Germany, manning up to its historical responsibilities. He's always able to say, see, now look at East Germany. Communist Germany wouldn't give a penny. Communist East Germany said, we're not responsible for the Holocaust. That was West Germany. Here in East Germany, everybody was a tzaddik, Yisod Olam, and we're communists, and we doing money. Maybe the Jews should give us money, something like that. And so this was a big contrast to the entire world. They said, listen, West Germany at least admits the responsibility. West Germany is paying something. East Germany is lying. So which one is the legitimate Germany? You see? Which one is the one that deserves any kind of moral credit? Ben-Gurion, as the 1950s goes by, constantly reiterates, the BDR, the German, the West Germany, is a new Germany. It's got nothing to do with the old past. Adenauer, the Germans love to hear this sort of thing. And what happens after a few years is that under the influence of Ben-Gurion's number two, a young guy named Shimon Peres, West Germany will start to do all kinds of illegal weapons transfers to Germany. To Israel, excuse me. There were all kinds of weapons transfers to Israel. So here is Franz Josef Strauss. He was the defense minister under Adenauer. This guy was the chairman of the CDU in Bavaria. Notice, the super right-wing, beyond right-wing. In America, you might call it the KKK. He's Israel's best friend. He drives in his own car to the, you won't believe it, to the Israeli legation in Cologne and gives them all kind of secret weapons that the Germans are working on. He has planes, him and Shimon Peres hook up all these deals. They have planes that smuggle them the latest technological equipment, for cannons and tank parts and things like this all the time. Franz Josef Strauss will visit Israel, some may remember this, in the late 50s, I think, early 60s. He wants to see over there. And Begin will organize a huge demonstration against him because he's from the extreme right and from the Nazi element and all the rest of it. And just before the demonstration, Ben-Gurion and Shimon Peres will call him to the office and say, yes, now let me show you what he's doing for Israel. And Begin will say, oh, we'll call off the demonstration. You see? So it's a funny world. You understand? It's not what you would have expected. It's not what you would have expected to happen, and therefore it resulted, I'm talking about a process that began a long train of events that has resulted in a screwball world. Today, as you can see in this picture, Germany is Israel's best friend in Europe. Right? It's funny. You wouldn't think that, but that's the way it goes. There's Angela Merkel, of course, who is from the CDU. She's from Adenauer's party. You see? When the right-wing party in Germany is in power, like under Helmut Kohl, it's actually better for Israel. This makes no sense unless you understand the tortured but strange story that unfolded tonight. I just conclude by pointing out that they really saved Israel's bacon, if I can use that expression, because what it meant was that for the rest of the 50s and even beyond, Israel was getting in $250 million a year. They were getting about $100 million with the Israel bonds and all this stuff from World Jewelry. They're getting $100 million from Germany. And they're getting about $50 million